It's the Draft Fellows coming at you live. Kyle and Andrew breaking down the drive. Prospects to roster, we got the flow. First round picks to the ones you don't know. Talk about the combine, skills on display. Who's rising up and who's falling away. Roster building like a GM in the zone. Kyle, Fellows, Andrew Mertig, they own the phone.
Hey, welcome back to the Draft Fellows podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows. I pointed the right time this week.
Nailed it.
Together, we are the Draft Fellows, so make sure you check out our channel on YouTube, or, of course, you can check out the audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. Today, we have a little bit of a different show than we've done the first 3 weeks. We are going to continue to talk about our favorite performances from the 2024 rookie class, but we're also going to highlight some 2025 NFL draft prospects through my very first mock draft of 2025. How's everything going, Kyle?
It is going great. I am really excited because we kind of have some like big uglies on the docket today. Like sometimes we talk like we're not a fantasy football show, but sometimes we get sucked into like the stats and we want to talk about like the shiny objects like wide receivers, running backs, and how they're performing in their rookie years. But today we've got some guys who make the space for those guys to have success. We're going to talk about, and honestly, like it is just hard to come into the show not in a good mood after the intro song. It still gets me, and I love it. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to hear your mock draft because, like, you know, we're months away from, like, I guess all of the mock drafts starting to drop, but like just a little bit of a taste of what we love is really fun. So to get into those picks and hear what you got going on, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, but let's get started. You talked about us having the big uglies, and I'm going to kick things off with Dominick Puni, the guard from the San Francisco 49ers. He was a third-round pick. He was probably expected to compete for a starting job, but he really immediately won that outright going through camp. And right now he's ranked as the 14th guard out of all of the league by Pro Football Focus. And again, think of PFF what you want, but Puni has been really, really impressive. He was absolutely fantastic against New England in week 4, 30 pass block reps. He allowed 0 pressures. He had an 88.4 pass block grade, according to PFF. And if you aren't familiar, that's like elite. So just absolutely fantastic. But hey, by the way, wasn't just effective in the pass game, a 79.1 run block grade on 32 run block snaps. So really a complete player right now. And I know New England has some faults, but for San Francisco, I think Puni is one of the reasons why they are prospering right now. So a little bit of a struggle weeks 2 and 3, but bouncing back in a big way and getting that offense going. And that's going to really start up front by better protecting Brock Purdy and getting that run game going without CMC. And Puni has been a nice surprise and a big part of how they've been able to do that.
Yeah, Puni's a player that I think a lot of people liked in the draft process, but I think people kind of thought like maybe he would need a little bit more runway before he was ready to step in and make a difference. So really fun to see him off to a great start and making an impact maybe earlier than people thought. I was excited when I saw you drop his name into the show doc because I knew that I was going to talk about another one of these big guys, and that's center Zach Frazier for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Frazier was taken in the middle of the second round at pick 51. He was kind of a guy I felt like kind of got lost in the shuffle in that pre-draft process just because we talked a lot about Jackson Powers-Johnson. We talked about Graham Barton and his versatility to play the center spot, the guard spots, maybe even play tackle. So these were kind of the guys who kind of headlined that like interior zone of these players. But Frazier was often overlooked. His pro career, though, is off to a great start. He's been good as a pass protector, but really the noticeable difference has been made as a run blocker for these Pittsburgh Steelers. He is PFF's 6th highest graded run blocker among centers, so obviously already making a big difference there. Throughout the process, I really liked him because I think he kind of has an understated personality when you listen to those interviews. One thing people may not know, I love digging into the personal interviews throughout the process, whether that's combine or just even the Senior Bowl and these kinds of things where you can get just a flavor of the player. And he just kind of had that kind of laid back personality, but his eyes just lit up when he talked about what fun it was just to kind of do work in the run game. And so sometimes when you get a little bit of that kind of crazy screw loose kind of a guy, that's the kind of player you want in the middle of your offensive line. So he was a finalist for the Campbell Trophy, which is the academic Heisman. Just a player that was also like an impact player on the field, off the field as well. So this is a player that I think we expected to have an impact early, but maybe not to the degree that he has. And so there were some concerns about his length coming out, short arms, but everything else was there. So my offensive line 3, interior offensive line 3, looks like he's going to be a great player for the Steelers for a long time.
Yeah, and one of the things that really, like, you came out of the draft after the Steelers took him is like, wow, that is a Steelers guy. Yeah. Like just he's super smart, but tough, gritty. You go back, what Pittsburgh is looking for in their offensive lineman and what that city is really all about. And Frazier met all of those things. So it's nice to see him excelling really early. And you would have to think like this is going to be the center in Pittsburgh for quite a while. So that's another really fantastic pick. I was struggling to figure out who I wanted to highlight this week. And I think going into your offensive line allowed us to pick 2 really, really good ones. So we're going to transition over to talking about some 2025 prospects. And what I decided to do was, instead of doing a full mock draft, because things are wild if you go picks 11 through 32.
Yes.
And there are a lot of NFL executives sort of whispering that this draft class may not be very good. So it might be a little bit more top heavy than we're used to. We kind of saw that last year as well. And so I wanted to just focus on the top 10. Now, the point of doing a mock draft this early is not to be accurate. It's almost impossible to do so. The draft order is going to change so significantly between now and next April. Also, of course, players are going to rise and fall as the college football season goes, and then we get into the all-star circuit and the NFL Combine. Yeah. But I think this is a really great way to start talking about storylines. One, it's a way to address teams that have struggled through the first 4 weeks of the season. And 2, it's a great way to start highlighting some of those top-end prospects that we're taking a look at now. So I went based on Tankathon's top 10. So they basically, throughout the season, tankathon.com will take a look at who is going to be the number 1 pick, whether you're watching, NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL. They have a list out there, and you can check it after every single week and see what the draft order would look like if the season ended today. And currently, the Jacksonville Jaguars have the first overall pick, and I'm going to go a little bit spicy here and have our first non-quarterback going number 1 in a little while, first non-offensive lineman quarterback, edge rusher in a very long time, and that is skill player Travis Hunter out of Colorado. And the reason is pretty straightforward. One, he is just such a unicorn of a talent. He can impact the game in so many different ways. He's coming off of yet another phenomenal performance for Colorado. But Jacksonville has a huge hole at cornerback. And so I think for Travis Hunter, you can plug him in and be your CB1 from day one. And also, oh, by the way, they could use a little bit of juice on offense because Brian Thomas looks fantastic, but everybody else has been not so great. And they have a lot of sort of middle of the field slot, intermediate kind of receivers, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram. I don't know that Gabe Davis is necessarily the answer. So you could plug Travis Hunter in there at wide receiver for some special snaps, allow him to really thrive. I know some people think he's better at wide receiver. Okay, cool. Then do it. But Hunter can help you on defense once in a while as well. And he's just, yes, maybe these are not as premium of positions as offensive tackle and edge rusher and quarterback, but he has a chance to impact multiple non-premium positions, and wide receiver and corner probably are like on the border of premium positions, and just be really, really fantastic for Jacksonville. So a guy that can totally change the trajectory of that franchise.
And so before we go on to the second pick here, this one is really fascinating to me because like I'm paying attention to, who these prospects are and how this draft order is going to come together. But like you said, like premium position, not like cornerback, wide receiver, it would be kind of interesting to have a player like that go 1. What's more interesting to me in this scenario is like if the Jacksonville Jaguars end up picking first overall, like this team will be overhauled, like coaching, direction of the franchise. Like obviously they just paid Trevor Lawrence, and like I believe that Trevor Lawrence can be fixed, but I think that the Jacksonville Jaguars have to kind of commit to like what does that look like? Like what kind of a coach should we bring in to make that happen? And so like what did they do at 1 if they're in this spot to best facilitate that kind of a revamping of their entire organization because of how kind of committed they were to like this being the correct direction and maybe not being in that spot if they end up at 1. So I think Travis Hunter, like you said, like would give them that kind of versatility. Like he can help the defense, he can help the offense. So maybe that's what they would do here. I would be tempted, like offensive line, I think is always a good place to be if you're trying to fix a quarterback and like, assure him that he's going to be upright and those kinds of things. But as we'll kind of see, maybe as we work down the board, like, is there a talent in this class that's worthy of number 1 overall? So there's so much to figure out here, but I love that Tankathon has them at 1. I think it gives you an opportunity to see like, what would this do if you put a team at 1 that doesn't necessarily need the quarterback, and like how do the dominoes work themselves out? So really fun.
Yeah, and I had to redo this mock draft after Monday Night Football because the Dolphins lost, and the Dolphins shot all the way from like pick 8 or 9, wherever they were, to pick 2. And so for the Dolphins, we don't know what the future of Tua looks like. And there is a quarterback that is shooting up draft boards, somebody that I really, really loved when I took a chance to watch him this offseason, and then coming into the year, he's just continued to improve, and that is Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. So we hope the best for Tua. I would love it if he was able to come back to football and be healthy, but there's just so many factors that go into it, and I think Miami probably needs to look towards the future. So for the sake of this mock draft, we're going to go quarterback, and Milroe is the guy that I have at the top of the board for the Dolphins.
Yeah, this is interesting. And obviously all those caveats go into this, like what does Tua's future look like and all those things, but like scary for the NFL, right? Like if the Dolphins were able to get someone with this much, I don't know, dynamic ability into their offense and like just kind of keep running with the way things are there, I feel like that makes a ton of sense here. And so I like it. I will be fascinated, and we'll work through the rest of this top 10. Where do the rest of the quarterbacks fall? What order do they go in? I think we'll be shuffling the deck with the quarterbacks probably up to April. And I think that's going to be maybe the most fascinating. Like I feel comfortable saying from what the limited amount of film I've watched to say this class is not as good as last year's class at quarterback, but I think the order is just going to keep shuffling until we get there. And I think there's going to be all kinds of different opinions and different flavors. But right now, the way that Milroe is playing, it's hard to not see him being that first guy off the board.
Yeah, because he can definitely settle into the vertical passing game that we know the Dolphins are going to rely on. But in addition, his legs combined with Devon Achane, like I don't know how you cover that, because you can do read option and then throw deep. You can hand to Achane. You can run yourself. I mean, my goodness, they're gonna have defenses running every which way if they're able to secure a athlete and really somebody who's starting to become a complete quarterback prospect. We know the Patriots have their quarterback prospect, and they're picking at number 3. And so my temptation was to go offensive line, maybe skill position, add another weapon for Drake May. But instead, I went with the player that I have as my number 1 cornerback, and that is Will Johnson out of Michigan. So I said I was intentionally trying to be a little spicy here. Christian Gonzalez looks like one of, if not the best young corner in the game. And we know the Patriots likes to play press man and leave their corners on a little bit of an island, let those pass rushers get home. With Will Johnson, Christian Gonzalez, I would be fairly confident that cornerback would be settled in New England for a while.
Okay, so what's interesting here, like we have Travis Hunter, which again, position versatility, side of the ball versatility, but getting 2 corners off the board here at 1 and 3, I think speaks to like maybe if this is a weaker draft class, maybe defensive back might actually be a place that at least at the top of the board where there will be some talent. So that's fascinating to look at that. As a Drake May fantasy owner in Dynasty, I will potentially throw things if the Patriots do not get an offensive tackle with this pick. But I understand, as a Michigan fan, like, Will Johnson is a special prospect. We highlighted him on the show a couple of weeks ago, and I think safe but also dynamic. So I think it makes a ton of sense from a team rebuilding just to add that guy to your team and let him play, like you said, opposite of someone who's dominating at corner on the other side. So fascinating pick here. But I think getting 2 corners off the board this early would be a really fun way for things to go in April.
Now, I can't imagine the Bengals are actually picking at 4 when April comes around, but that is where they are currently slotted to select. And so we know Joe Burrow is not going anywhere. We know that they have weapons kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Who are you going to take at 4, right? So offensive tackle, if you believe in somebody, that would be probably a good selection here, but they did take Amarius Mims in the first round this year. They do have some experienced veteran tackles. Their defense has weaknesses, but there wasn't really anybody I loved. And we think the Bengals are more than likely than not going to lose T. Higgins this year. So I went with wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan out of Arizona, who I think is probably the ideal T. Higgins replacement.
This is a very Bengals pick. Like, they're like, we could take an offensive lineman, but, we could take another wide receiver. And I think we've seen him do it before. I think that you said the T. Higgins thing is like writing his on the wall there. I think that they absolutely expect to lose him. I don't know if Yasavash, or however you say that, like, I know he's like one of your guys. Like, he's kind of like shown a lot there, and they have some other guys, Burton, that could emerge. But like, getting a talent like McMillan here makes a ton of sense. And I think that, like, Burrow needs help. Maybe that's offensive line. Maybe that's another receiver. But I think at this juncture, like, I don't know how high he's going to go, but I could see the NFL falling in love with a guy with his frame, catch radius, and saying, like, Joe Burrow's just going to throw it up to him, and that's how we're going to win football games.
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals have a pretty successful formula going forward. So, why not try to repeat that? And I think sometimes with guys like Burton or Yoshivash, you're hoping that they can jump from a number 3 to a number 2, but we kind of saw with Tyler Boyd that wasn't necessarily the case. And I think, with the Bengals, okay, well, we have 4 good wide receivers. 2 of them may be great. Let's ride with that and see what happens. So division rivals and fellow Ohioans, the Cleveland Browns are picking at number 5, and the Deshaun Watson experience has not been a good one. And so I do have them taking the second quarterback in this class. And in this case, it is going to be quarterback Cam Ward out of Miami. Ward has kind of jumped around a little bit. He started at Incarnate Word and then was playing at Washington State. Is that correct? I believe so. And transferred to Miami this year. And his development just continues. This is a guy I thought had the potential to be a first-round quarterback. He has shown some things in Miami, the ability to run an offense, some really great accuracy. He's making some big-time throws. Guy with a ton of tools. So kind of like Milroe. I mean, he's not that kind of athlete, but like he's making the jump. He's proving what he can do in his development through college and playing at multiple colleges.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Like I mentioned earlier, these quarterbacks, the order that they go in is probably going to be the most fascinating thing in this draft cycle. And Ward is the quarterback that I've probably watched the least, at least closely. And so that is going to be, I don't know, like the Browns have to figure out what they're going to do. And I know there's the financial implications and all those kinds of things, but the opportunity to kind of reset things here. And I don't think it's any secret that a lot of Browns fans would be pretty excited about the opportunity to just kind of begin, turn the page and begin again. I think if Watson had been good, I think good play covers a lot of some of the turmoil that came with him coming in with such a big contract and the baggage that came with that. But they're kind of stuck, right? Like they need they need to begin again. And I think that Cam Ward would give them that opportunity for sure.
Yeah, and that's certainly a very talented team, and getting the quarterback right could really help them to ascend into the upper echelon of the AFC. The Tennessee Titans are picking at number 6, and I'm going to go with the third quarterback. This time we're going to go with Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. So a little bit of a different fit here from Will Levis. I think somebody that is athletic enough to make some plays with his legs. The accuracy is something that, is relied upon. I think Shedeur has a lot of tools that are really exciting. Whether or not his coach / father is going to let him play in Nashville, I don't know. But I think just from a purely fit standpoint, it is an interesting transition. And taking a look at the Callahan offense, I think Shedeur could really be a successful player, especially given the weapons that Tennessee has.
Yeah, and I think that we all thought that Will Levis had a chance to take a big step forward this year, and I feel like there's been no other spot in the NFL where there's been a conclusive. We kind of have enough of a sample to kind of know that if it was different, but with this new coaching staff coming in, it feels like they kind of already know what they think of Will Levis from some of the comments in the pressers and things like that. So this makes a ton of sense that they would go quarterback here, that they would just say, it's been a while since we've had a quarterback that we've kind of built around here in Tennessee that we felt like had a ceiling. And obviously Shedeur Sanders is incredibly talented and would give them that kind of ceiling to build kind of a new era of Titans football.
Yeah, and I kind of doubt that we're going to see 4 quarterbacks in the top 10 this draft season, but maybe. And, especially if the class isn't maybe as strong throughout as we think. We know that there's a lot of need at quarterback. We've already hinted at that. We've hit on several. Carolina Panthers are projected to pick 7th, and I have them taking the 4th quarterback off the board, and that is quarterback Carson Beck out of Georgia. Talk about changing directions. The Panthers tried to do something and buck the trend by taking a sub 6-foot quarterback and number 1 overall in Bryce Young, who maybe doesn't have the strongest arm, but more of a rhythm and timing passer. Beck has the prototype of basically everything that you'd be looking for a quarterback. If he was coming out in the 80s, he would be the number 1 overall pick and probably be considered a generational player. He's tall. He has a huge arm. He has a really nice pocket presence, but he also has some decent athleticism to go along with that. I think there's still some things that he needs to work on, but the big time throws are there. And I think for Carolina to take a step forward at quarterback, Beck is a pretty good option here.
Yeah, I think Beck is one of the more interesting names to me of what the second half of this college football season could mean to his stock. I think he came in kind of with the expectation that he could emerge as the guy and be that top quarterback. I don't know that we've seen that yet. He's had good moments. I don't know that we've seen the consistency. I think that if he can right the ship, I think there's still an opportunity for him with the tools and with the pedigree with Georgia. I think there's a lot of reasons that the NFL will like him. So I think we could see him ascend on this board even higher than where he's at pick 7. But 4 quarterbacks, I think it will be interesting. Like you said, what is the strength of this draft? Do the quarterbacks go higher or do they slip a little bit depending on how the rest of the season plays out? We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and the LA Rams are at pick 8, and I do not think that this is a need at all. I think Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk are pretty good interior defensive linemen, but I went with Mason Graham out of Michigan, and this was just this player is too good to be sliding this far. There are people that talk about Mason Graham as a Christian Wilkins impact kind of defender, and we know what the Rams just lost in Aaron Donald this past offseason, and Mason Graham has the opportunity to step in there and be really, really special in the middle of this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really intrigued about the 9th pick here that's just around the corner because I've been dying to see an offensive tackle come off the board, and we haven't got one, but we finally do. Tell me about Will Campbell and why you selected him here for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I think, the Cardinals have a lot of things starting to click on a young offense. And I think from a defensive standpoint, you could definitely see them investing a lot of capital there as well because their defense has been a little rough around the edges so far. But ideally, you're going to want to protect Kyler Murray, and you're going to want to be able to get the ball to your playmakers downfield. And Will Campbell is the first tackle off of the board. here. I do think probably when we get to April, there's going to be more offensive tackles picked in the top 10 than just one. But I think for the Cardinals, this is a need. I think Campbell has a ton of upside. And we know what happens when you get these elite level athletes at tackle. They're going to go through testing. Some offensive line coach is going to get really, really excited about the upside, and they're going to fall into place. So I think Campbell's got a little bit of development ahead of him, but I think for the Cardinals, this is a really good fit.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see which offensive tackles emerge throughout the process. I know a lot of people like Kelvin Banks from Texas, and there's a couple other guys in the mix there. But Will Campbell, the only tackle in the top 10 for Andrew Mertig. And this is exactly how this is going to go in April. It's chalk. So everybody can just relax and know that that's where this is going to go.
This is it. And so number 10 currently is the New York Giants. And I wanted to just do something fun. We know that the Giants are loving their investment in a top 10 wide receiver this year. Yeah. So let's do it again. Let's add Luther Burden III out of Missouri. And this is mostly because the quarterbacks dried up. We had 4 go in the top 10. I wasn't willing to pull in a 5th. And for the Giants, hey, if you're going to have to maybe roll out Danny Dimes one more time, let's give them as many weapons as possible. Yeah. The run after the catch threat is going to be ridiculous with Luther Burden. And I think, from a New York Giants standpoint, football is going to be real fun in the Meadowlands.
Yeah. Malik Neighbors is so quick. There's no run after catch. It's just the run after the threat. He just he skips the word in there. No, that's really fun. I feel like Giants fans, I think they're going to have to try to figure out the quarterback thing. But you have to have a trade partner. There's only so many quarterbacks, and where they end up. They have a talented roster with guys like Malik Neighbors emerging. So maybe they don't pick high enough to get one. So that's going to be fascinating if they end up kind of in a quarterback purgatory. And then what if Daniel Dimes just he's going to write out this contract? It'll be fascinating to see. But lots of things are going to happen over the next couple of weeks and months that are going to inform this conversation. Lots of changes. Stocks will rise, stocks will fall, and then we will turn into the spring and we'll do all the testing and things will continue to change. But it's fun at this point, at the very beginning of October, to say, okay, if the draft were today, who's it going to be? Who are the guys that are going to fill the slots? And then to look back in the spring and look back at what we did in October and see how things have changed and how things are different. But it's a fun exercise. Andrew, thank you for leading us through this to kind of take a look at the way that the draft could go. But we are several months away from this kind of taking shape, and we're going to continue to learn about this process. But thanks for joining us on the show today. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show. We are back with you throughout this process as we continue to learn. So stick with us. From the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.
Kyle got the insight, Andrew brings the heat. Breaking down the roster every single week. Catch us on the podcast, we coming through your speakers. Top picks for practice squad, we got the seekers. Team dynamics, contracts, and the trades. From the draft day excitement to the accolades. Draft Fellows on the track, we gone strong. Analyze the plays, we can't be wrong. From the 40-yard dash to the longest throw. We talking pro ball, yeah, you know.